Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Janice Kaiser. I'm one of the site directors at one of the Google Children's Centers. And I'm delighted today to introduce my friend and colleague, Rona Renner, who has been working with me on and off for several years. Rona is the founder, or the co-founder of Childhood Matters, which was a wonderful radio show in Berkeley in English and in Spanish for 10 years. And she is a consultant, a writer, as you can tell. And she's been an incredible resource to both parents and educators in the Bay Area and beyond, particularly thinking about both issues of parenting and also who are these children and how does temperament affect who these children are, how our relationship works. And it was so exciting to me when she called me and let me know that she was writing this book, because I feel like it's going to be such an incredible resource to families. The very cool thing is that Google is supporting this, and so Books Inc. is at the back of the room selling books for $5, and people can, and they will have them in the bookstore so that you can, with your badge, go in and buy them for $5 at any point that you want. For today's talk, several people are VCing in, and if you have questions and you're VCing in, you can go to the link go/Is That Me Yelling, the title of the book, and put up questions. We'll start questions in the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes, so people in the audience and people who are VCing in can submit their questions. Let's see if there was anything else I needed to say. Oh, Rona's probably going to talk a little bit about this too, but I helped her get connected with Google Help Out. So she is a consultant available on Google Help Outs now as well. So without further ado, it's your turn.
It's great to be here, and thank you to Janice Kaiser. She and I have worked together over the years. She even substituted for me as the host of my radio show a couple of times. So it's a pleasure to be here at Google, and I did get on Google Help Outs now, so I'm looking forward to having some consultations there as well. So I'm going to speak to you today as a professional. I'm a temperament specialist and a parent educator, parenting coach. I'm also a nurse for about 47 years. I started when I was very young. And I love working with parents. And I'm talking to you as that professional today and also as a parent. I have 4 grown children. They're all doing wonderful things in the world. And even though I look back and see some of the real challenges we had, you know, I want to just give all of you hope. If you have young children who are strong-willed or intense, giving you a hard time once in a while, they make for great adults. And so I have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. So I speak as a parent and a professional. And I wrote this book in part because parents were coming to my classes that I was teaching, and they were saying a lot, you know, I don't know what's going on, but I'm yelling. I'm yelling at my kids. I'm getting more frustrated. And because I yelled once in a while, I'm not going to say how much, but it really wasn't all that often. But I didn't like it. And I thought that's a great way to focus a book that's really about mindfulness. It's really about getting to know yourself and becoming more aware of yourself. And it's also about discipline, which we all know means to teach. And so it's a book that combines a lot of my interests, especially temperament. And just in case you don't know what temperament is, it's a person's natural style. It's the way you come into the world. You know, all children are different. All of you are different. Some are active, some are low energy, some of you are sensitive. Some of you are maybe shy, others are extroverts, so that's what temperament is about. And I realized that if parents looked through that lens of temperament, they could understand their kids so much better and themselves, and it could really reduce power struggles. So there's a lot in my book about that as well. I'm going to read a little bit from my book. I'm going to talk with you, and then I'll take your questions. This is from the very beginning, the introduction. Some years ago, my daughter Karina was downstairs yelling at her brother Matt to stop bothering her. Angrily running to the stairs, I immediately responded at the top of my lungs, "Karina, stop yelling!" In that moment, certainly not the first of such moments, I suddenly heard myself. Is that me yelling? I was appalled. I was a nurse, a parenting expert. I knew better. That day, I promised myself that I would try to stop doing things that I didn't want my kids to do, starting with yelling. I came to see that my actions were not always the best approach for my children. But when I paid attention and made efforts, over time, I learned from my mistakes. After all, I had stopped smoking, and I could stop yelling too. Parents find themselves yelling at their kids for a lot of reasons. Maybe you were raised by a yeller, and you can't seem to kick the habit of letting your feelings spill out and land on your kids. Now you want to rid yourself of some traditions that you just don't think are healthy for you or your family. You know, I think that's what happens when we become parents. We see all of our traditions, all of our conditioning, and then we have to decide, what do we think? What do we think is best? Or perhaps you're under a lot of stress and have temporarily lost or misplaced your compassion, kindness, and gratitude. This happens easily during parenthood, even though you've discovered deep wells of love for your children at the same time. Since I first became a parent in 1970, I've learned that we all make mistakes, that there's no such thing as a perfect parent, and that parents love their children. We have the best of intentions, but we're all limited by what we know how to do. And so yelling can really be reduced if you want it to be. Just thinking about it will help you. Someone just saying, looking at the title of the book helped them yell less. Just being reminded that, in fact, it's a good thing to do is to yell less. So I should say something about what I mean by yelling, right? If you're being firm with your child, stop jumping on the couch now. It's time to go out and play, you know, with that firm, clear voice. That's not yelling. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about yelling when you lose it, when you lose your cool, and the intensity goes up, your blood pressure goes up, you feel your pulse getting faster, your face maybe gets hot, your fists are clenched. You know that feeling a little bit? And it's good to identify what that feels like for you. And then all of a sudden you blow. I've had enough. Don't you know it's time to stop? Why can't you ever behave? I'm sick of this. You know, that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be those words, but it's that intensity. And of course, what kids hear is, I'm sick of you. Not, I'm sick of it, whatever it is. And so kids do take on a sense that they've done something wrong, but also that they're bad. And one of the things we want to do a lot in parenting and teaching young children is differentiating between a child who's misbehaving, that their behavior is not okay. You know, pulling your sister's hair is not okay, but it doesn't make you a bad person. And I think it's really important in child development to understand that. And you know, a lot of research has been done about how yelling impacts children, how it affects children. Most professionals agree that yelling has an impact on a child's feelings about themselves, their world, and the relationships they have with their parents and others. According to psychologist Myrna Shore, when parents discipline by yelling and commanding their children, they're more likely that the children are then more likely to show physical or verbal aggression. These children will have more difficulty with positive social behaviors, such as taking turns and empathizing with others. Now I'm going to tell you about another study that was done, it came out last year, and this is with the University of Pittsburgh. And they followed 967 middle school students. And there's a lot to yell about when you have a middle school student, I have to say. It's a hard time for students and for parents. Anyone here have a middle school student? No. Okay. Yeah, they're great. They should just be out on a farm somewhere. I think a farm would be a really good place for middle school students. Those whose parents used harsh verbal discipline, such as yelling, cursing, and using insults, were more likely to be depressed or have behavior problems. The research showed this. The study found that it was also not effective in getting kids to stop what they were doing. You know, in the moment, if you yell, a child might stop and do what you say, right? They've been trained if you really yell loud enough to stop. But it doesn't seem to prevent them from doing it again. And I think the key there is that we're trying our best as parents to, or uncles, some of you might be uncles, you don't have kids, or aunts. We're trying to teach problem solving, not just put like a damper on the behavior. And this study was very interesting. It said that even when children are raised in homes that were generally warm and loving, they found the consequences, these effects, still on these middle school students. So the study is suggesting that even if you're warm and loving, the yelling or harsh verbal discipline will still have an impact. And I just want to say something about that. It's very important that parents know it's never too late to kind of shift your parenting style, to shift your discipline. You shouldn't feel that, you know, just because I did it for years means my kid is hopeless, I'm hopeless, and nothing's going to help. I believe that what you do, the love that you give your kids, the meals you make, the fun places you go, the times you sit and read together, how you take care of them when they're sick, all of that matters. It really does matter. And I think what the study is saying, perhaps, I'm not sure, but perhaps, is that kids remember, though, that yelling. It really stands out. You know, and you could think about it with a relationship with your partner or boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse. If you've had a fight, if you've had an argument, and they say something that really hurts your feelings, that stays with you. Same thing with a boss. You know, coworker, that stays with you. And they may do lots of nice things, but somehow those hurtful words stick around. And now you can repair that. And I have a part in my book about how to repair when, in fact, you say things that you really wish you never would have said. It's possible to repair relationships, but kids remember it. So the story there is do your best to learn how to respond rather than react. Most parents are yellers now and then. You're not alone. And I think it's really important to know that you can change. So how do you do that? Well, the first thing I always ask parents to do is think about why they yell. Why am I yelling? And we won't do the mic here, but I'll just ask if you yell very loud, some of the reasons you yell. Who here would like to say? Just call out, yeah. Kids aren't listening. That's one of the main reasons. Why else do you yell, if you yell? Or your partner yells, maybe. Frustration. You're tired. Anyone here have a little sleep deprivation going once in a while? Yeah. You're tired. You're frustrated. Kids aren't listening. Maybe you're really mad at someone else and you're taking it out on your kid. That happens. People yell sometimes because they're dealing with trauma. Maybe someone died in the family. Maybe you're depressed. You're yelling a lot of the times because your expectations often are that your child will do what you say. Especially, I notice this a lot with professionals. They're used to getting things done. You know, high-level professionals get things done. You ask a coworker to do something, and often they'll do it. And if you're a manager, you're used to being able to tell the people under you, please do this, and they'll do it. But kids don't work that way. Kids have a mind of their own. They have little 2-year-old minds and 3-year-old minds and 10-year-old minds. So I think it's important to realize that we have to have realistic expectations. A child who doesn't want to get ready in the morning to go to school doesn't know that you have a meeting at 9. And they don't really care, right? It's not part of their world. And so they know that they like hanging out and playing with one more Lego game. So think about what's realistic for your child, and especially the type of child you have. What would your child tell you? If your child could express how yelling affects her, what do you think she would say? At a home visit I made in a professional capacity, I asked a 7-year-old boy, if you had a magic wand and you could make a wish to change something about your father, what would it be? He replied without hesitation, I wish that he didn't yell anymore at me or my mom. His father's stern face softened as he listened to his son, and he held back tears. He made a commitment then and there to do more about managing his anger and working on his marriage. A lot of my book is about no shaming, no blaming. When you begin to observe things about yourself, and many of you probably know about mindfulness, and some of you might practice meditation or mindfulness, but the key is that when you begin to observe yourself, you have to be kind to yourself. If you're going to notice what you do and then give yourself a really hard time, what a lousy parent, I'm never do it right, then you're going to stop looking. So being a good enough parent means that you're not perfect, there's no such thing as a perfect parent, and that you are willing to see what's true. Not an easy thing. So in my book, I use the cognitive behavioral approach, and that has to do with noticing your thoughts, noticing your feelings. What am I feeling right now? What am I thinking? And then being able to shift that into something else. And I'll go into more detail about that in a minute. So the key is triggers. We talked a little bit about what triggers you. Your kid's not listening. Your kids being maybe fighting. Anyone here have more than one child? Maybe some of you listening. Yeah. Does fighting ever happen in your house where the kids are fighting with each other? Yeah, that's a real trigger for a lot of people. External triggers are things that happen, kids fighting, leaving their toys around, whining, that's a big one. A lot of parents hate it when kids whine. Tantrums, those are external triggers. But chances are you're not going to yell unless you also have escalating thoughts. So for example, my husband leaves his underwear on the floor or the towel on the floor, and so the external trigger is the towel on the floor. The internal trigger, and my husband doesn't do this, he's fabulous, so I'm not, this is a hypothetical. The internal trigger is, why do I have to be the maid around here? Why do I have to clean up? Why can't he put his things away? I don't understand. So there's an escalation. I need some water. Thinking about towels on the floor must have gotten me. So there's an escalation that happens in your brain. And the thoughts, the negative thoughts, stimulate more of that adrenaline, more of that cortisol. And that's when you're more likely to blow. And cortisol and adrenaline is, a lot about the fight and flight and freeze. It's useful in situations where we really have to fight or flight. But in my relationships, I've learned fighting and flighting is not the best way to go. It just really isn't the best way to go. So I feel frustrated. I have these escalating thoughts. There's nothing wrong with my feelings. They teach me, they inform me that I've got to talk to my husband again about not leaving his stuff all around. Anger is okay. It's normal. It's just another emotion. It's what we do with it. So now I have these thoughts, I could replace them with something more neutral. God, he's so good at so many things. Maybe I could just let this one go. Or I know he was really in a rush this morning. Or, oh gosh, he's just like his father was. Whatever it is. But something that kind of brings you down. And that's the beginning of being able to be responsive rather than reactive. And it really, really does work to have awareness of what you're feeling. And it took me years to figure this out. Because we're like this, we're going really fast, right? So to become aware of what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and see if you can shift it a little bit. And I'll talk more about that. And in the book, there are a lot of common triggers that people can identify with and begin their process of understanding their own. And in the book, Full Catastrophe Living by Jon Kabat-Zinn, he defines mindfulness as moment-to-moment awareness cultivated by purposefully paying attention to things we ordinarily never give a moment's thought to. So breathing is an example of something that we normally don't pay attention to. And you can be mindful at any time. You could be driving in the car and noticing your hands clenched on the steering wheel. Next time you're driving in traffic, take a couple of breaths. Become aware of how you're feeling, what you're thinking. See if you can relax your body. It's a way to be in the present. So much of our life is spent in the past or in the future. You know, your work kind of pulls you to the future. You're often evaluating what's going on in the past. So we actually have to make a very conscious effort to be in the present moment. What do your children see? Whether or not you're aware of yourself, your children are constantly observing you. You know, they're watching you go like this or cursing when you get cut off. John, a psychologist and a great dad, told me the story of how his 9-year-old daughter, Carrie, gave him feedback about the morning monster. One day at breakfast, Carrie walked into the kitchen making a mean face and jumping around with a wide stance, making ape-like monster sounds. John laughed and asked her what she was doing and what kind of animal was she. She replied, "I'm being the daddy monster. This is what you look like in the morning." Chagrined, John asked her why she thought he looked like this, and she simply said, "'Cause you're angry all the time in the morning." John thanked her for letting him know. After all, he was a psychologist. And he sheepishly walked off and looked in the mirror to see if the monster was still there. And it was. John realized he was rushing around in the morning with a million things on his mind. And although he wasn't always angry, he was preoccupied and frequently irritated by how long things were taking and how much there was to do. His daughter's feedback increased his desire to observe himself and be more present with what was going on in the moment, rather than just worrying about the future. Your children are perceptive and sensitive, and you can be too. Now it's your turn to see yourself. And when you get a glimpse of your angry monster, see if you can become friends and get to know each other. And again, I know, I have grandchildren, and I know how busy life can be. You know, everyone sitting here and everyone listening remotely, you probably work long hours. And if you have kids, you're busy. And it feels like you can't be present in the moment, but you can be, because in fact, sometimes it takes less time. Just that extra hug, or that extra, "Sure, I'll read you, but just for 5 minutes," can save you time, because a meltdown might happen otherwise that might take a lot longer. And I tell parents a lot. I do temperament consultations with parents, and I tell them that it's really important to think about, even though you're tired, getting up 10 minutes earlier to have your coffee, take your shower, before your kids are up. That alone might be able to help you in the morning feel less of that monster feeling. And for everyone, it's different. And I think the real focus in my book is that you're the expert. You're the expert on your child, on yourself, not me. And part of being the expert is to become more aware of yourself. And the temperament part in my book is a whole chapter on temperament. Helps you identify your traits and your child's traits and see where there's a good fit and maybe not such a great fit. You know, I had one child who's fabulous. He's doing great things in the world, and I adore him. And he was an intense person, and so am I. And so we both get very passionate about things, but when he was a young child, he and I would escalate. You know, he'd do something, I do something, and it gets up there. And I really had to learn. I had to learn how to manage my own intensity. I remember one time he did something, I think I won't say what it is because he'll probably watch this. So he did something that made me really mad. And I thought, I just can't go there and scream at him. I've got to calm down. And I said, you go to your room until I cool off. And I realized that's what I needed to do. I needed to cool off before I responded to him. And then I was able to give him the discipline that I thought was appropriate. One time he was also yelling about something, so I went to his back door and I started yelling. Ignore him, folks out there listening. He's just having a tantrum. And he said, Mom, you're being so embarrassing. Stop. I said, I'm not going to call CPS, you know, whatever. And I started laughing, and he started laughing. And I said, okay, if you stop, I'll stop. You got to use sense of humor with kids, too, especially when they're older. So the temperament chapter is really important in understanding your style and your child's style. There's a yelling tracker in my book, and the yelling tracker is the key tool. You know, like when you want to figure out your finances, you have a tracker to track your spending. If you're going to Weight Watchers to lose weight, they give you a tracker so that you could know, what is it I'm doing? And so my yelling tracker basically tells you for maybe a week or two, when you've yelled, go back and say, when was it? What time of day? Maybe it's always at 4 o'clock. You know, if you're home at 4, you might melt down, or it's always in the morning. Notice what you did and what your child did, and then notice how you felt about what happened. And think about, what could I have done differently? So the tracker is one of those key pieces in the book that really helps. The ABCDEs of not yelling. Let me just very briefly tell you what that is, and again, go into much more detail. So A is ask yourself what I'm thinking and feeling, just like I mentioned. B, breathe. When in doubt, take a couple of belly breaths. It's amazing. I think the research shows that it takes about 6 seconds. There's an organization called 6seconds.org. And I learned from them that it takes about 6 seconds to start lowering your cortisol and coming back to your grounding. So if there's no emergency, if your child's not about to run into the street, because then you want to yell, right? You know, they're going to run into the street, yell as loud as you can. But if there's no emergency, you don't have to discipline right then. Take time to breathe. Ask yourself, what am I feeling? What am I thinking? C is calm yourself. So through your breath, you'll calm down. You might need to get a glass of water. If it's the evening, maybe a glass of wine, your coffee, spray some rosemary spray, whatever helps you feel good. Go to the bathroom, I don't know. So calm yourself is C. And then D is decide what's needed. Okay, I'm calm now. Because when you're angry and you're in your primitive brain, Dan Siegel talks a lot about the brain. He's a psychiatrist in LA, and he talks about the higher level brain and then the primitive brain. And when you're angry, you sort of wind up right in that primitive brain. And you know what? You're not thinking at your best. My husband used to say, you know, it feels kind of good being angry. You get all this energy, you know, it's not so bad. But in fact, you're not making the best decisions unless you have to fight or flight. So decide, calm down and decide what's needed. Your kids are fighting. Maybe all that's needed is you need to say, okay, guys, separation, 5 minutes, go play by yourselves. Or one of you, come make dinner with me. The other one, go set the table. or you wait a minute to see if they can work it out. Every family's different in terms of what you think is the right thing to do. Decide, does my child need a hug or do they need a limit being set? But when you're clear, you'll be able to decide that better. And then the last part is E, A, B, C, D, E, empathize. Oh, right. She just came back from her dad's house last night. It's always rough, you know, the day she comes back and we have to make that transition to mom's house and dad's house. Right. There's always some acting out. I need to spend a little more time with her today. Or empathize with a child who, you know, just isn't feeling so good. Or with your child on whatever level you can, take a minute to see what are they feeling. And also have some compassion for yourself. Boy, I'm in a grouchy mood. I didn't get much sleep last night. No wonder I'm acting this way. So the ABCDE is a quick way to help you. It's like one woman who read my book said, she said, Rona, I feel like I have you on my shoulder going ABCDE, ABCDE, you know, and I have to just go, all right. Ask myself, breathe, calm down, decide, you know, empathize. So it's a tool for you. In the book, I also have the 4 C's of discipline. Now, discipline is such a huge subject, and I address it in the book with an umbrella of the 4 C's. And I don't give every possible discipline tip, you know, you can want, because again, you have to know your child. You have to know your style. And hopefully, if you have a partner or a spouse, the two of you are talking about how actually to agree on the discipline. That takes a lot of effort, yeah? Yeah. So the 4 C's are communication. You're not going to say to a teenager, now don't come home late. You're going to say, be home by 12. You know, you have to be specific in your communication. Now come on, Jane, be good. What does that mean? You have to be specific in your communication. Choices are another C. Too many choices are not so good for kids. But once in a while, they really need some sense that they have a little bit of say in their life. So, you know, my grandson, I was with him and he needed to take a shower the other day. And I said, you know, Maceo, you need a shower. Do you want to take it now or in 15 minutes? And he says, I don't want to take a shower now. I said, okay, I'll set my timer. Timers are a great tool for parents, and I have a whole section on timers in my book. I set the timer on my phone for 15 minutes. He heard it go off, and he happily went into the bathroom. Because somehow it's like neutral. It's not like someone bossing me around. It's just the timer. But that choice helped him prepare himself for something that he really didn't want to do. Some children really need to have their choice of what to wear in the morning, even though it's not matching. You know, it doesn't match, but maybe I could let them go off to the wonderful childcare that Janice does. C, the 3rd C is consequences. I have a whole section on family meetings. Because as a family, you need to spend the time thinking about what the rules are. You know, here at work, if you're here on your job, you get a sense, and I'm sure it's always changing, but a sense of what are the rules? What am I allowed to do? When am I not allowed to do? And maybe there's a lot of leeway, but the family rules are really important. And then you can talk about the consequences. You know, and if you have some rules on the refrigerator even, it's easier to remember what you said the rule was, because I used to have trouble remembering, you know, what did I say here? So you want to think about the consequences, and I don't believe in harsh, punitive discipline. I've just worked with enough parents. I used to teach classes in Richmond, California, and Oakland, and all over the Bay Area, and it's become so clear to me that harsh punishment doesn't really teach kids to be the adult you want them to be, because they've got to learn to solve problems. It really is about play and problem solving, but there are times they need consequences, and the book talks a lot about that. I think you know, a consequence might be that, you know, your child forgets her lunchbox for a few times in a row, and you don't rescue her and rush off to bring her her lunch the next time, and then she remembers, I need to get my lunch box. You know, there's a lot of ways to think about consequences. The last one of the 4 C's is connection. Even if you work full time, there are ways to make sure you connect with your kids. And if you have more than one child, I strongly recommend you have special time with each child. And parents will say, well, but it's the family time on the weekend. We all need to be together. But the truth is that kids also, I believe, they also need time one-on-one with the parent. Because when you're one-on-one with a child, you're less frustrated, and you get to rediscover kind of what's wonderful about them. I'm going to be sure and save time for questions. So let me just read a little bit more. Use humor. Creativity, pick your battles. You've all heard this, but really think about what's important. What do I want to have a consequence for? And there are things maybe I could just let go. In my book, there's a section on special circumstances. If you're divorced, single parent, foster parent, if you have a child with a disability or a disorder, you know, there are children with attention deficit disorder. I used to work a lot with parents whose children were diagnosed with that. Big subject, we won't get into it here, but sometimes a child who's impulsive will really trigger you more. And you know, you could have a child with a disability and you're working so hard to be an advocate for them, and your fuel tank goes low. So there's a lot on that as well. I think I'll end this part, because we'll get to your questions, with a thought to consider. If only we could protect our children and ourselves from all suffering and pain. That'd be so nice. We can't, but we can do our best to manage stressful situations that throw us off balance. Yelling doesn't make anything better. It only takes you further away. We all make mistakes as parents and miss clues pointing to the way towards healing. When your kids are grown, you'll look back and realize the things you could have done differently. If only you had been more aware, knowledgeable, courageous, or kind. Forgive yourself for mistakes you've made and do what you can now to make a difficult situation a little bit easier. Spend a few minutes each day thinking about the things you're grateful for. This will help you restore your balance during hard times. And the book ends with the words, "World peace begins at home." Because I've been thinking a lot about how frustrated I feel sometimes, that I don't know what I can do to make this a more peaceful world. I'm sure many of you have that feeling too when you listen to the news or Google something. And I realize that if we all do what we can in our homes, it actually matters. When we do our best to treat our children, others, and ourselves with kindness and respect, even with our imperfections, there's a ripple effect. A shift takes place in ourselves, in our children, in the people we interact with every day. When we heal our wounds with courage and honesty, we can use our energy for our benefit and the benefit of others. One person like you or me can have a significant impact on the violence, greed, suffering, and lack of compassion around us all. If more parents model respectful communication and empathy, because your children are learning from you, then the next generation will have a better chance to create a more peaceful world. Consider these questions every day. What will I discover today that brings meaning to my life? What will I learn from my children, and what will they learn from me? And how can I offer love, comfort, or peace to someone? And I end with those words because I even see it with my adult children. My oldest son just turned 44. And I realize it's an ongoing, lifelong process of learning how to be the person you want to be and raising a child to be the adult you'd like to see the world have in the world. And that's where I feel so grateful that I've learned a lot. And this book, I think, shares both the mistakes I've made, some of them, just a few. There are a lot more, just a few in the book. But also the things that I've learned to change. So I'm going to stop talking right there for a minute so I can take your questions.
My question is about how much of what you've been talking about and the topic of your book would you say applies equally well to grown-up children, if you would, adults?
Yes, it's a good question. How much of this applies to adult relationships, right? And I have these two dear friends, and they bought the book because, you know, it was their friend who wrote it, but they don't have kids. And they've been reading it together, and they say that it's really helped them in their arguments, in their fights. Because the truth is, I'm talking about how do you respond rather than react. And when a partner does something suddenly and you're angry or frustrated, there you are. You have a lot of choice right then. You either go right with it and you get into that argument, or what I learned to do with my husband, I have a great husband and we've worked hard on this, is to say, wow, I'm feeling kind of frustrated here or mad, you know, I need to cool off first. And when I do that, it's really important to say, and let's talk in 5 minutes, because if you just leave, you know, unless it's dangerous, of course you leave, you raise up a lot of abandonment issues as well. But in the workplace, too, and I was talking with someone earlier, and he was asking about, can this be used in the workplace? Absolutely. When I work with parents, I often say to them, think of a boss you've had who was a really good boss. What were some of those qualities? You know, I had a great boss when I worked at Kaiser. He had a sense of humor. He was encouraging. He gave me a lot of autonomy, but gave me feedback if things didn't go well. You know, and I thought of all those qualities, and those were qualities that I wanted as a parent, because children look to you as their boss. So I think it's very transferable in your relationships with coworkers and partners. Also the temperament part. You know, some of the issues that couples have are not because one person is right and one person is wrong. It's really about their difference in temperament. You know, you might have a very low energy level, so you want to stay home and watch, you know, baseball or just kind of read a book, and your partner might have a lot of energy and they want to go and do. And it's not like one of you is wrong or right, but it's that temperamental fit. So I think even though the focus of the book is on yelling, and yelling for parents and children, what I write about is so applicable, because that ABCDE can work with anyone. And is that answering your question? Yeah. And I really appreciate those of you who came today who aren't parents. Thank you. Because you were kids at one point, and you know what it's like being raised by parents. So you may someday be a parent or an uncle or an auntie, and knowing this information can be very valuable. Yeah, go ahead.
My question, you touched on something earlier, and it made me laugh just for the second, because that's what we're going through with my child now, is the constant whining.
Whining.
And I'm curious if your book addresses ways to combat that, because it seems like sometimes the only way we can get her attention to stop whining is if we raise our voice to just stop them. Otherwise, it's a constant loop of just high-pitched whining or screaming or crying or whatever the moment warrants.
How old is she?
She's 3.
3-year-old who whines. You know, the 3-year-old is really trying to figure out their power. You know, how much power they have, and can they get what they want. And I think with whining, it's similar to a lot of other things. If what you're doing isn't working in parenting, stop doing what you're doing and think, how else can I approach this? I'm a smart person here. What could I do differently? Well, for some people, they just won't respond. They just zip it when the kid is whining. And they can tell them, look, when you speak to me like that, I'm not going to respond. I need you to take it over again. You've probably tried that, right? And will she take it over again? Right, I'll just say, I'll repeat what she says. She just keeps whining. It might stop for a second. I've done it where, with the little older children, I've had someone use a tape recorder and let them listen, take your phone out, let them listen. This is what whining sounds like, because you may not understand what I'm talking about, especially because she's probably intense, and so she has that kind of passion and intensity. This is what it sounds like. Now, I'd like you to practice. Let's practice. And when she's not in a bad mood, I want you to practice how to ask me the same thing without whining. And then, of course, you give the positive feedback to that. But parents will often react because of their own frustration. It's as though the whining is getting under their skin. And so you have to work on that ABCDE breathing. And if it's in public, you need to take her into the bathroom or take her. It's just like a tantrum.
It's more like when I'm driving.
When you're driving. Oh, don't they know how to get to you when you're driving? And, I found that if I wasn't on the freeway, I would pull over. I know you're often in a rush to get somewhere, but I'd pull over and say, I can't drive when you whine because it's dangerous. I'm afraid I'll get into an accident because your whining really bothers me. Or wear headset and just ignore it. That's the other thing to try. So the idea here is, again, without knowing, I would want to know her temperament and help you that way. Just try different things, but don't let her strong reaction then make you react. And that's what the yelling is. You just want it to stop. And what you're teaching her in a way when you're yelling is saying, if we have strong reactions, we get what we want. And whining will pass. It will definitely pass. But it's a great question. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I just wanted to share that my daughter, she's 3, and she is a leader, as they say. She loves, being very active and leading kids. And she learned that if she yells at school, the kids listen, and it's very effective. So we've been working with her, trying not to yell. She doesn't do it at home. It doesn't work on us. But she does it at school. And what I wanted to highlight is sort of within the framework that you're describing is that the teachers at school came up with this brilliant idea. They made a little book. It's like 5 pages, pictures, like a little caricature. And it says, you can take a breath, you can talk to a teacher, you can move away, you can read a book, and it basically gives you 5 choices. So when they catch her in the moment when she's about to start yelling, they give her this little book and say, choose, what would you like to do?
Fabulous.
And so she does, and then she doesn't yell. But the beauty is that you need to catch her before she yells, because once she starts yelling, she's already in that stage.
Right,
and
and the teacher in this situation is saying, yelling is an automatic habit, and just like for some of you parents, yelling is an automatic habit, and so there are other choices, and if you can catch it before your adrenaline kicks in, same thing with her. But I love that the teacher has really developed a book.
Yeah,
and say,
I thought
here
it
are
was
some other choices. It's brilliant.
I thought it was so beautiful. I took pictures, and I thought, I wish I had it, with me too. Sometimes, like there are situations when you get upset. What about the book?
Well, if you ever want to send it, to me, I'll post it on my website. Oh, by the way, nurserona.com is my website. I should say that, and I'm also on Google Helpouts. Okay, let's see.
Thank you.
And Nurse Rona RN Facebook. Okay, what specific strategies can you offer to deal with young siblings hitting each other? My wife and I try so many things. We want them to work things out on their own without maiming each other. Good goal, right? No maiming. Hitting is coming up a lot for me in my practice. A lot of parents have been calling me because the kids are hitting. And I think it's the kind of thing you really have to have a serious family meeting about and really set that rule, no hitting in our house. And, a lot of parents, 80% of parents still use corporal punishment, I'm told. But a lot of parents use yelling instead of hitting because hitting, was seen to not be so good. But if you can say no hitting in our household because you don't use that yourself, it's a good way to have a meeting and say, hitting is not allowed in this house. And here's why. I don't want to hit you. I don't want you to hit each other. Those kids, the person who sent this, thank you very much, they also need one-on-one time with each parent, so they're getting some special attention because that reduces sibling rivalry. And then you might have to have it connected to some privilege they have. And I do say that once in a while you need to do that to break a habit. And it might be that they love their TV time after dinner. And it may be that here's this very simple chart. You didn't hit your brother. There was no maiming today. You each get your TV time. And if hitting happens, you won't, because in our house there's privilege and responsibility. You know, kids think that the TV or the iPhone or the pad is attached to them. They think it's another organ sometimes, you know, especially with older kids. And we have to remember that those are privileges. So sometimes you need a little leverage, but I think the first step is to really have that family meeting and say, this is important to us. We really don't want anyone in our house to get hit. I can take another question.
Can you suggest any simple conversational tactics for suggesting your book to someone who could probably use it without seeming to obviously insult their capabilities as a parent?
Yes.
Maybe this person is even married to you, or maybe it's a relative or a stranger.
Me. I love it. I love it. You know, how do you suggest this book? And I've had a lot of people ask me that. And, you know, in your case, you just bring it home and say, God, I heard this really good talk at Google today. And, you know, I just thought, and then just leave it there. But don't say, here, honey, this is for you, you know, because, you know, she's not going to like it, or he, or whoever it is, you know, not going to like it so much. So you could say, you know, I got this book. I thought that I could learn a lot. And if you're interested, we might even want to look at the temperament piece together. There's a whole chapter on different temperaments. So that's sort of a safe, neutral place to go. I've had people ask me that who are grandparents, and they want to give the book to their children who are yelling a lot. And I think you have to be really tactful, because no one wants to be told they're a bad parent. We feel insecure as parents. But if you are living with someone who's yelling a lot, you can have that honest conversation and say, you know, I know we have different styles. You're Italian, I'm not, you know, whatever you want to say. And I know we have different styles, but I thought maybe we could read this together, because the studies are showing that a lot of yelling is detrimental to kids. And I know I'm not perfect and I do things wrong. And maybe you would yell less if I pitched in more. Because that's the other thing I talk about in the book, that sometimes you're yelling because you want your partner to hear that they need help, that you need help, not that they need help. So I'm busy and I'm yelling at my kids, but what I really want is my partner to come in and help. So it could open up a great conversation. I think it's 12:59. We need to stop. And I'll stick around if anyone has more questions, and I'd be happy to sign your books. And I just want to thank you so much, and thank Janice Kaiser for being my host.